Oh, yeah, 100%. I think the first thing I will say is that, I, you know, if I'm able to join, I'm going to learn a lot from you one and a lot from the student participants. So you call me an expert, but you are an expert, and all of them are experts, and so it's gonna change my life. Um, I started my career in New York State after the impact of Superstorm Sandy, the hurricane that hit um, 2012, I believe, and was working in construction and helped sort of rebuild housing, small business, and other infrastructure after that storm. And that is what inspired me to pursue urban planning. So that got me into, or sort of inspired me to go into MIT, where I was fortunate enough to meet Carl. And so at MIT, I studied real estate development finance, economic development, and economic development finance under Carl. I wrote my thesis with Carl as my advisor on small business, economic resilience, and financial resilience after disasters in rural southeastern United States, and left MIT in 2019 and went to work at an economic development consulting firm called HR&A Advisors, HR&A, and ultimately spent almost 6 years there. Did a really large variety of different things. Most of them were connected to economic development. And so, for instance, guided cities and states on industrial development strategies. We worked with the state of Maine on a set of 6 underinvested rural communities with abandoned paper mill assets that were once centers of economic growth and job opportunity, but with the fallout of that industry in the United States had sort of become not used. And we're sort of helping the state come up with strategies to attract new business to those areas that already had infrastructure and connection to the power grid. There were no barriers in terms of pre-development, of getting the land ready for new usage. The only barrier was just a lack of capacity at the state and local level to do the business attraction and local community development needed to keep the business retained there. Also did similar work in more urban areas, so in Massachusetts, in the Central Valley of California, and did a lot of sort of higher level, more general economic development planning for cities. So worked in Miami-Dade County, Florida, for a year on a county-wide economic development strategy for Mayor Daniela Levy-Cava there that focused on small business and sort of getting Miami-Dade County ready for climate change from an economic perspective. We did a little bit of work with the World Bank group in South Africa, where I worked with a big team, and we focused on how do we fund and finance adaptation to climate change impacts in a place where it's really hard to do that. You mentioned, a lot of the communities you work with don't have access to data or don't have the money to pay for studies to figure out how many people live in that community and what are they paying. Are they paying rates and taxes at all? We had similar issues in South Africa where there just wasn't that much data. And so we had to be very creative about figuring out ways of sort of how do you understand flood maps and sort of flood vulnerability in those communities, and how could you maybe borrow against future expected real estate development to fund the flood adaptation infrastructure and the water quality cleanup infrastructure that we need today. So that was an interesting exercise that could be applicable. And I guess the other thing I'll mention is that I did a lot of work more on the infrastructure side obviously infrastructure and economic development are inextricably linked, but did a lot of work on how do you pay for and make the argument for climate adaptation infrastructure. So doing cost-benefit analysis to to demonstrate that, if you installed a flood wall in Detroit, or if you installed a flood wall in a system in New York City, the benefits over time would outweigh the cost of the project today. And doing community engagement alongside that to sort of make sure the community felt like their needs were being represented in whatever project was being developed. So there wasn't a surprise when the plans came out. And so that's sort of, I did a few other things at HR&H as well, like broadband and digital equity work and a few other things. But it was a lot of different experiences, I think, that could be really additive here. So very recently I moved on to the Milken Institute, which is a think tank. We're nonpartisan. We're based in the United States, but we have offices in London, Abu Dhabi, Singapore, and at the Milken Institute, I work in the finance pillar, and I focus on a project called the Community Infrastructure Center. And the goal of our work is we focus on rural communities in the United States and underinvested urban communities, tribal communities that don't have the capacity to advance clean energy, broadband internet, and other small-scale infrastructure projects on their own. And so we help them navigate the process between identifying a project idea, figuring out how to do a feasibility study, navigating the steps of pre-development, building a capital stack to pay for the project, whether that's grants or low-interest loans, and then sort of doing procurement and moving the project forward. Because a lot of communities in the United States have just never done this before, but the time is now to start, updating the electrical grid or installing solar panels or upgrading public facilities to withstand disasters. And so we're doing a lot of work around that. And I'm also focused on Los Angeles after the wildfires that happened earlier this year, and figuring out how we can offer free assistance and tools to community-based organizations there to help them organize recovery projects and resilience projects and connect those projects to grant capital and debt capital, if possible, when it's time to rebuild. So that's a little bit about my background, and I do think a lot of it could be helpful in sort of advising and offering perspectives to the people who participate in the course. And